right, I think we can begin. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning and good evening to some of you from wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Pacifica Graduate Institute's webinar today featuring our PhD in depth psychology with emphasis in integrative therapy and healing practices program. My name is Rica Toribio and I'm the Senior Director of Enrollment Management. And I would like to welcome you again to our presentation today. Our presentation is called Many Ways of Knowing the Meaning of Therapeutic Sensibility. And today's speakers are from our program, our distinguished panel includes the chair of our depth therapy program, Dr. Juliet Rohde-Brown. We also have Dr. Fanny Brewster here with us today, Dr. Lionel Corbett, Dr. Pat Katsky, and Dr. Elizabeth Nelson. How we will format today's webinar is that our speakers will be presenting to us, and then at the very end, you will all have the opportunity to ask questions, and we would recommend that you put that on the Q&A form. I would also like to inform the attendees that because of this heat wave and the possibility of rolling power outages today, should you get disconnected from this webinar, you could always reconnect through your mobile devices. So same login as you had when connecting to this, you could again use your mobile devices to reconnect with us. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you again our distinguished speakers from the PhD in Depth Psychology program. Thank you all, and take it away.
Thank you, Rica, for introducing us. What I want to talk about today are three of the very important factors that are common to all different types of psychotherapy, without which I think the therapeutic process doesn't work at all. One is empathy, the other is therapeutic presence, and the third is the act of witnessing. Now, I'm going to begin with therapeutic presence because it's the hardest one to describe. We've all had the experience of being with a doctor or a therapist or some healthcare professional who transmits a kind of sense of comfort to a suffering person. It feels like a kind of subtle atmosphere in the room that transmits the sense that things are going to be okay. It's quite hard to describe, and it hasn't been well studied. So we're not sure exactly what it is, but we all know it when we recognize it. It's some kind of soothing effect that emanates from certain people in therapeutic practice. And this is, if you felt this, you know that this is in contrast to healthcare professionals who, when you're with them, makes you want to leave the room as quickly as possible. So what's the difference between people who have this soothing, helpful presence and people who don't? Well, first of all, therapeutic presence is a special form of attention to the other person, combined with the intention to be helpful and caring. And this can be felt even if we're with somebody in complete silence. We convey therapeutic presence by our tone of voice, by our body language, our facial expression, gestures. Presence is also about being available, receptive, and completely open to the other person. Presence requires what we call deep listening, which means listening with very close attention, with absolutely no judgment, with no preconceived ideas, without trying to make something happen, allowing oneself to be affected by what's going on in the relationship. Sometimes when we do this, there's a sense of timelessness and a felt sense of a lack of boundaries between the two people. In Jungian parlance, this is the kind of presence that helps to constellate the inner healer. Now, most healing traditions will describe a spiritual component to the healing process that's independent of our cognitive processes. It's not a function of technique. When you talk to healing practitioners about the components of healing, they typically talk about factors such as love, focused awareness, intuition, creativity, imagination, relatedness, and the direction of energy towards the suffering person. Typically what they say is that love provides the energy that's required for healing, while intention provides its direction and its focus. So you need that combination of energy and focus. And it's very important to point out that none of these kinds of things can be measured quantitatively. There are no instruments for measuring these kind of things. These are qualities that can be described. They can be evoked, but they're not material, they're not physical. Presence is a kind of subtle energy that extends beyond the body. Now, to be fully present, one has to empty oneself of one's own concerns and not have an egoic investment in the outcome of a therapeutic relationship. One has to allow a kind of internal space inside oneself that can be filled with the other person. To be truly present, one has to let go of one's theories, one's presuppositions, diagnoses, all that kind of things. Theoretical orientation isn't as important as being fully present, and it's the opposite. Being present is the opposite of insisting on a specific technique. If the more you focus on a technique, the less you can be fully present. You have to be fully in the moment with no goals in mind. The other way that presence can signal itself is by a sudden moment of intense emotion between two people. It might be anger or joy or vitality or excitement, some emotion like that. These kind of instances lead to a very deep moment of meeting and connection between people. One's whole self is in the encounter. Now, presence requires empathy. So let me say a little bit about empathy, because this is a word that's often misunderstood. It's not the same as sympathy, it's not the same as compassion, and it's certainly not the same as pity. Empathy means that to varying degrees, we feel what the other person is feeling. That can even extend to a sensation of somatic pain, pain in the body that the other person is feeling. This has been referred to as vicarious introspection. It means the ability to feel oneself into the inner life of another person. The Germans have a good word for this. They call it Einfühlung, which literally means feeling into. Empathy allows us to be emotionally attuned to the other person. It's a mode of perception, a form of communication, and a very, very important way of being with others and understanding others. And in psychotherapy, empathy operates in both directions. The therapist and the client or patient empathically understand each other. And then once one has perceived something empathically, one then may be able to elaborate it cognitively and talk about it. But I want to say a little bit about the dark side of empathy. Empathy can be used to be helpful, or empathy can be used to hurt or manipulate someone. Sadistic people use their capacity to experience empathy to enjoy knowing that someone is in pain. This is one of the ways that empathy is not the same as compassion or sympathy. We can be empathic without feeling sorry for a suffering person, without taking any moral responsibility for his suffering, and with no desire to help. So this is how empathy is quite different than compassion. There are a small number of people who are either unable to utilize empathy, or they actually find empathy unpleasant, either because they lack the childhood experience of finding empathy helpful, or because it makes them feel weak and pitied. Now, empathy is extremely important because without empathy, other people become objects rather than human beings. Empathy probably evolved in our remote past among higher mammals as part of our instinct to parent, because parenting requires that we make an empathic inference about the feeling of a baby or a child. Empathy is essential to our humanity. It motivates moral action, pro-social action. It has the effect of diminishing the emotional distance that we feel from suffering people. As a result of empathy, a kind of shared emotional field arises between the participants. Normally, empathy develops in childhood, given a normal childhood environment. The only time it doesn't develop is when the child never experiences empathy from caregivers, or when empathy is abused, as we see in the family of future psychopaths. Those kind of families inhibit the development of empathy, but otherwise, in the average family, the potential for empathy seems to be built into the human nervous system by evolution. Now, I think the capacity to be empathic determines whether or not one can be a caring person. The combination of one's capacity for caring and one's ability to be empathic radically affect whether one is capable of moral behavior. In short, whether one is a decent person or not. Empathy enters into our concept of right and wrong, good and evil. And so it's very important in our political system and in society in general. Lack of empathy contributes to society's ability to ignore the suffering produced by poverty and homelessness and that kind of social ill. And it contributes to racial and religious prejudice and conflict. Now, another very important aspect of this kind of therapeutic relationship is what I call bearing witness. This becomes particularly important when one is with somebody who has a problem or a difficulty that's so difficult that we really cannot offer any help. The only thing we can do is be a witness to the person's suffering. There are situations that are so painful that the only meaningful response is a kind of silent witnessing. But it is the silence of presence and empathy. It's not an empty silence. Sometimes one can only be a witness without being able to change a situation that's causing suffering. And then it's very important, if one is a therapist, to act as a witness to what has happened. People often need to give testimony to their experience. They need someone to listen to it. Intense suffering produces isolation, because people who've suffered and who have survived often feel that what they've been through can't be expressed and won't be believed. We saw that in concentration camp survivors who wouldn't talk about their experience. So the sense of being witnessed and believed by a therapist may prevent a lifelong attitude of silent resignation to suffering. Now, witnessing is a mutual experience. It's not passive. We grasp the emotional significance of what's being said and we're affected by it, but we don't interfere prematurely with advice and suggestions. Those kind of things are just ways to cope with our own anxiety. We have to simply be there without judgment. This is a form of active presence and active listening, allowing the soul of the suffering person to be heard. A good way to do this is to encourage the person to tell the story of what's happened. And stories always have multiple layers of meaning. Sometimes people don't know exactly how they feel until they talk about it. They can't make sense of something about themselves until what they say is said is in the presence of another person who accepts it. So witnessing is not just about offering comfort. It matters to people that someone else deeply understands how they feel and someone else recognizes what has happened to them, even if nothing can be done about it. This is particularly important if the therapist is working with someone who's been the victim of evil, who's been abused in some way, because then the psychotherapist stands in for society as a whole, acknowledging that the evil should not have happened. And if the witness therapist can help to contain the pain of these kind of memories, the suffering person is better able to integrate them. Sometimes we are then privileged to witness the emergence of an aspect of the person's soul that has not been available. Sometimes we can witness a truth about the person that he or she cannot see about him or herself. What's needed is an unobtrusive, holding silence, combined with the therapist's emotional investment in the suffering person. This is required for witnessing what the soul wishes to say. The word holding here is very important. Holding means allowing space for emotions to emerge in a way that feels contained and safe. The witness must have no agenda, no judgment, and must not be committed to any particular outcome. A witnessing attitude requires receptive silence, which may mean that the therapist has to sacrifice his or her wish or need to say something. Witnessing requires courage and faith. We have no idea what might emerge as we witness. We have to be affected but not overwhelmed. It's painful to see a person suffering, but we cannot avoid our own discomfort. Sometimes this leads to detachment in caregivers who can't tolerate what's being stimulated in themselves as they witness another person's suffering. To stay with the suffering of another person is to suffer oneself. Suffering in another person as a witness invariably stimulates our own vulnerability and our own difficulties. So we have to be careful to manage our own feelings and not burden the suffering person by inducing a kind of obligation to look after the witness. I think I've had all my time. Thank you. I think I better stop at that point.
Hi. Good afternoon or morning, wherever you're located. I'd like to share with you some words that I've written, and I think they will reflect what I'll say after. So I'll just start with this and then share whatever I have, whatever else I would be saying. Intergenerational cultural trauma. The pain of ancestors and their descendants exists not only within the biological intergenerational body, but also the archetypal DNA. In our American society, we are aware of artistic, religious, socioeconomic, and other factors that determine culture. We are increasingly more aware of cultural trauma carried by the group. Intergenerational cultural trauma travels within the lineage, one family to the next. Psychological suffering as cultural trauma does not originate and end with one selected generation, but keeps producing the same repetitive, damaging characteristics. How do we begin to think of cultural healing in the long term as an intergenerational potential? Within different cultural groups, we can see cultural trauma as an aspect of broader societal issues that remain unsolved. The result is that we remain trapped in an almost karmic cycle of cultural trauma affecting all American cultural groups. What can we imagine is possible for changing this cycle? I like to ask this question and questions like it, having to do with intergenerational cultural trauma. I find that my own work is a combination of an eclectic background that has dealt with having body work, with having dream work, with having transpersonal psychology. And I think that all of these experiences and more are a reflection of the work and the sensibilities that I try to have when I'm providing teaching in the classrooms at Pacifica, when I attempt to do the work with dissertation students, where I'm chairing their dissertation or I'm an internal reader. I think that there is a circle of care that should happen and could happen as we approach the work that we do as an integrative model. So I think about my experience, not just now as a professor at Pacifica, because I am that now, but I'm also someone who attended Pacifica. So I feel that in a way I help to carry on the lineage of the work that was started 40 years ago when Pacifica was first founded. I came there as a student to study dream work, and that remains a primary interest to me. As a Jungian analyst, I find that the work that I do with my patients can be intermingled and a part of my work with teaching students at Pacifica. It's a part of the material that I use to teach with my students. And I find that there is such a circle of care in all of these different areas. I think that, you know, as I look at Jung's teachings, and as a Jungian analyst, I look at the work of ego and collective, right, put together, and how the interior space needs a focus, can work on individuation, needs to deal with shadow, needs to have an understanding of painful events that have happened perhaps in childhood. And yet these situations, all of them, have to be brought once again back into the collective. At Pacifica, I think we have this amazing opportunity to be in and on the land. Right now we're on Zoom, but eventually we'll be back to our campuses and able to walk on our beautiful campuses and to be engaged in that way. And so I think that there is this connectedness in the work from the land where we can have something of ego and ego strengthening, as we would call it, that then gets carried out into the collective. So at Pacifica, we are becoming, I think, more engaged with issues of social justice. I think that we are becoming more animated by our students coming in and what they can provide for us in our own learning experience. Because for myself, I think I will be learning forever. And this is how individuation also happens. It happens forever. It never stops. So I think that in considering cultural trauma, for example, intergenerational cultural trauma, which I teach about and I think about and I work with patients about and I talk with students about, like, it's very significant for us in the moment as to what's happening in our collective and around the world. It's also happening in our community at Pacifica, and it's also happening inside of us. And so whatever we are experiencing in these moments in an interior way, I support bringing that out into the world so that there is this true connection between ego and collective, looking at that Jungian perspective in that way. So I find that these are touchstones that happen in all of the work there. And I think I am glad to say that that's how it is, that we have this connectedness. So thank you.
Thank you, Fanny. I think I'm going next. So hello, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Nelson, and glad you are all here, or whatever time of day it is. I have a unique role in our program, which is that I'm the person that is in charge of the research curriculum, designing it, teaching all of it, as a matter of fact, along with a wonderful team of research faculty. And but many of the things actually that Lionel has already said and that Fanny has already said really do apply to research at Pacifica. We have a very unique approach. And it's an approach to research that was first really fully articulated by a colleague who's now emeritus faculty, Robert Romanishin, when he spoke and emphasized the vocational nature of research. And what we mean by that is that your dissertation topic is something that calls to you. It has a religious aspect in the sense that it's something deeply meaningful to you, either professionally or personally. Usually we find that it's meaningful in both dimensions, but that it also echoes through culture. In other words, we're looking for a way in which your topic has multiple levels of meaning and multiple levels of impact. So to follow up on something that Fanny was just saying, one of the statements from Jung that I really like and appreciate and bring into the research curriculum is his idea that the strongest influence in a child's life is the unlived life of the parents. That also includes ancestors. And so frequently what we see is in the research curriculum is a student that has a sort of an inchoate idea of a topic, and then they begin to develop it, and then they trace it back, and they realize, my goodness, this connects to something in my parents' lives, in my grandparents' lives. An example for you that's very recent is a student of mine is working on birth trauma among African American women. And she's discovered that her great-great-grandmother was a midwife, was the midwife for the community. And she had no idea about that when she first began her research. So in the vocational idea of research, there are reverberations back through time, which is a lovely way for us to really think broadly about a therapeutic sensibility that applies to culture. Not just to the individual life or our present family and tribe, so to speak, but something that is possibly therapeutic. You know, a wound that is passed down that is currently still a wound, and that in some way our research can address. So that's always very exciting to me. Another aspect of research that is unique to Pacifica is because we're constantly working to dissolve that Cartesian boundary, that split between matter and spirit. What we encourage our students to do is to think of themselves a little bit like shamans, who Mircea Eliade described as edge dwellers. And what he means by that is that the shaman is the member of the culture who lives at the edge of the community so that she or he can have one foot in the spirit world and one foot in the community world, sort of ordinary reality and non-ordinary reality. And I like that image of research because it implies that what our dissertation students are really doing is bridging that divide between spirit and matter. We're taking seriously the psyche and everything that the psyche offers to us creatively, all of the images that come to us. And then we're also walking in the world of academia, in which, yes, you need to research and write a dissertation, you know, you need to produce a work. And someday it'll arrive on your doorstep beautifully bound, and it'll be a fabulous moment. So the idea of the image of the shaman as the walker in two worlds helps us kind of dissolve this spirit matter divide that can be so damaging. The other thing that I want to say about research, again, to go back to something that Lionel was bringing up, is all of the three things that he mentioned having to do with really wonderful, robust therapy, of any kind of sort, that the three elements also apply to the research process. So therapeutic presence, empathy, and bearing witness or witnessing. Now, they're not quite the same as they are, of course, in a clinical setting, but it's very true that when students are working with their topic, there is a kind of a witnessing that is demanded of you, a way in which you are bearing witness to the images that are coming forward and the trauma that may be coming forward. So there's what we're looking for is an attitude that welcomes all of this and bears witness to what is coming into you. And that is capable of being present with what is happening. The empathetic move obviously is very important. It's important to have empathy for what is coming towards you as your topic. There's a fourth element though, and I think it probably belongs in the therapy setting, although I'm not a clinician, so I'm not going to, you know, assert that. But that element is curiosity. And I think it is related to the kind of interested attention that a good therapist will bring to their patient. And that's certainly that interested attention, that curiosity, that kind of leaning forward is something that we're looking for in your dissertation topic. So we begin the research curriculum in the fall of your first year. You actually begin developing an idea about your research topic in the fall of your first year, and that development continues gradually over the next 2.5 years of coursework. It's carefully guided, and it's very exciting. It's just, I have to say, I think I have the most exciting job at Pacifica, because I get to really watch the students, you know, find their dissertation topic and come into a relationship with it and watch it evolve and develop. And as the topic develops, the student also develops. In other words, it's a kind of a co-individuation process, if you will. There's something just profound and beautiful about those two things happening together. So my colleagues will probably argue with me on that I have the best job, but that's okay. I still feel that way. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Pat.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Pat Katsky, and I'm sure you're all feeling what I'm feeling, or I imagine you are. What an extraordinary faculty. It's such a gift to be part of this group of people and to be pursuing this life of such rich conversations, so many threads that are just such an important part of who I am and what all of this has meant to me to be here for many years. So thank you all. It's really a treat to be on this with you. And, you know, Elizabeth, I was thinking of your comment about being in two worlds. I feel right now this energy of we are all so much at the edge of two worlds. Here we are on Zoom. We're all carrying on talking about this deep inner learning that is part of our program. And meanwhile, there's so much going on around us on the outer world. And I just want to acknowledge the tension of holding the energies in both those directions. I want to turn our direction just a little bit now, and I want to look at some of the ways of knowing that develop as a person follows the path towards becoming a depth-oriented practitioner. As Lionel and actually everyone has mentioned so far, Jung's concept of individuation is very key to how we understand our program and understand the process of becoming a depth practitioner. Individuation is the idea that through a process of looking deeply at oneself, becoming curious about what we don't know about ourselves, particularly about the parts of ourselves that we may dislike or try to hide, by this process of inner exploration, we gradually become capable of accepting more of our wholeness and this leads us to the ability to participate in life with very deep authenticity. Depth practitioners, we commit ourselves to this process for our own growth, but also in order to be of service, because it's not possible to guide others along this kind of developmental path unless one has seriously done one's own work along the individuation pathway. So in order to understand the individuation process in ourselves and in others, it's important that we explore more than the different schools of psychology. In addition to the insights that these schools have produced, we need to draw on the wisdom found in the world's spiritual and healing traditions and practices. These vital and alive teachings can be found in indigenous and shamanic traditions, in meditative practices, in somatic awareness, in nature-inclusive healing practices, just to mention a few. Drawing on these non-Western ways of knowing helps us to move beyond a Western or Eurocentric approach in our exploration of the process of growth and healing. And this movement beyond the Western centric approach is one of the things I most love about this program, since we work very consistently to bring in other traditions, other ways of knowing, other techniques even, that take us out of what is maybe a Western perspective and give us much more of a worldwide sensibility in what we look at. Now, both depth psychology and the wisdom traditions are aware of the fact that the process of psychological growth and healing requires coming into contact with something larger than ordinary consciousness. Such experiences lead us to contemplate the mystery of our existence and to ponder the meaning of our time on this earth. These experiences can have the quality of being numinous. Numinous experiences cause us to feel awe. Sometimes they make us afraid, but they also fascinate us. They're moments of finding ourselves in the presence of something that is mysterious and tremendous. And in our program, this process of finding these moments is both a personal process where individual students are following their own individuation work. It's a process of working clinically with the people you work with and seeing this process occur for them. And as Elizabeth stated so beautifully, it is absolutely a part of the dissertation process and coming to be this writer of this deep topic that is really drawing you. Sometimes you're afraid of this topic, sometimes you're excited about it, sometimes you wish it would go away, but it has you, you don't have it. And that's an incredible learning experience to turn yourself over to that kind of inner psyche-led research process. That's a huge part of our program. Depth practitioners have found that numinous experiences are part of the unique personal healing that occurs in the individuation process. And to the extent that we can access such moments and integrate the wisdom and insights they bring, our life comes into a new balance. Led by our own deep knowing, we can develop the ability to live the life we were meant to live and better assist others as they follow in this same effort. In moving towards these goals, the depth practitioner develops the ability to relate to the unconscious symbolically, attending to inner experiences such as dreams, visions, inner images, unexpected feelings, and noticing synchronicities, experiences in which the inner world connects in uncanny ways with outer events. I have heard so many students talk about dreams they've had about members of their cohort, dreams of being on the campus and having something magical happen there. And heavens knows, dreaming about your dissertation topic is absolutely something that goes on a great deal. Through this process of connecting to our inner worlds, we come into contact with what Jung called the self, the center of our deep inner knowing. Now, I know all that sounds a little serious and maybe a little daunting, but I also want to point out that this journey can also bring us moments of profound peace, of joy, of a kind of a deep happiness. I think of our inner work in this program and in the individuation work in general as a form of what I call deep play, of finding access to our own creative reverie in an experience that is intense, compelling, and led by the psyche. Thanks so much. I'll turn it over to Juliet.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, all of you. I'm really resonating and echoing everything that each one of you has said, Lionel and Fanny, Elizabeth and Pat. Well, I'd like to share, I created some PowerPoints on images, and I thought that might be something a little bit different in how I speak about things. So let me share my screen. And I'd like to start with a poem, not a poem, but a little statement by Gloria Anzaldúa. And I know, Elizabeth, this is somebody you like as well. And this is the statement. At some point on our way to a new consciousness, we will have to leave the opposite bank. Why isn't it working? I'm going to start all over again because I want my screen to, here it is. At some point on our way to a new consciousness, we will have to leave the opposite bank, the split between the two mortal combatants somehow healed, so that we're both on both shores at once, and at once see through serpent and eagle eyes. So we've invited you to reflect on some things and to come here with us. And what we might be really looking at and called to in current times, and how someone with what Lionel has referred to as a therapeutic sensibility or temperament may serve in the most meaningful and impactful way, holding the tensions of the grief and transformative possibility that are both possible right now in that paradoxical way. We're in the midst of a pandemic, bringing voice now to systemic racism in a way that we never have, and other kinds of oppression, and living with the chaos of climate change. And our collective consumerism and sense of separateness from others and from nature, and ultimately from our own true nature, has caused a great deal of suffering in this world, and a lack of, we could say, ancestral remembrance. When we speak about the many ways of knowing, an important question to ask is, who is it that knows? How is something known? What is essential to know? And will we ever really know anything? And as I think about the title of this webinar today, which I came up with and we did together, I then reflect on that we could have actually called the title The Many Ways of Not Knowing, of staying profoundly present to curiosity and to questions that arise when we actually get out of our own way. Let the egoic stance of needing to pin down knowledge in some concrete manner, let that step out of the way, even for just a moment, and be in beginner's mind, starting with our body and what moves us, our feeling, our breathing, to a place of awe. And to me, the essence of therapeutic sensibility is this ability to engage fully in this intersubjective field. And as Lionel points out, and others who've just spoken, what we're really speaking about is moving from the concrete and the personal to the essential. So what is essential? What is essential? Well, Jung has offered this statement: the knowledge of the heart is in no book and is not to be found in the mouth of any teacher, but grows out of you like the green seed from the dark earth. How do we know? How do we know that we're in this kind of process of knowing deeply from the heart, from the bottom up? Each of you who joined us today, you've logged in to listen with us, to ask us some questions, because you had some kind of calling to the healing arts, the therapy arts. And I would venture to invite you to consider that this calling occurred when you were a child. And even that this calling may have emerged in you in some kind of relationship to the non-human even, to an expanded idea of an experience of intersubjectivity, perhaps in nature, the subtle nature of things. I know for me it was a tree and my brain-injured brother John looking into his eyes, and that's what did it for me. But I'd like you to just take a moment of silence to reflect on that when you were a child, just without thinking about it, what comes up for you. So as we're doing this together, have you noticed a particular feeling, a sense as we do this together, that even in this moment at a distance in cyberspace, the iron in our blood is electric, isn't it? And it's linking us to one another. Our bodies are joining in the noetic, in this non-local intersubjective field, and yet we do this with our bodies. These are conduits for the heart, for love. We can't escape that. When we attune like this to what Clarissa Pinkola Estes has referred to as the river beneath the river, well, then we can have more and more moments of being able to sit with uncertainty without experiencing overwhelming anxiety or despair, and to be able to even lean into the deep levels of terror and grief to companion others along this trajectory, while also acknowledging those moments of awakeness, of care, playfulness, capacity for social engagement, advocacy, and activism. Jung states it wisely with, "To be that which you are is the bath of rebirth." And so this seed of a shared living body emerges from a primordial and subtle mystery, doesn't it? And all of this represents a nonlinear, a spiral-like movement, but that calls for a dialectic, a relationship through these implicit processes and through embodiment. So we might even ask, and this is what we explore with our students as well, how are we even in relationship to medical, to physiological phenomena? For instance, a woman had a recurring dream of a thick, dark substance that was being pulled, like putty kind of from her neck. And this was a woman who wasn't engaged in union work yet or anything like that. She didn't think much of this dream, aside from really being curious about why it kept occurring. She also noticed that she was beginning to feel very lethargic, very sluggish and tired all the time. So she went to her doctor, not connecting the two. But she found out that she had thyroid cancer and she was needing to have surgery. And it was exactly that area of her body that she was dreaming about, with this thick substance being pulled. But she hadn't had a way to contextualize that dream or link it to anything she was experiencing somatically or energetically. However, she was fortunate to be able to work at that point in depth therapy. And after that, she began to take her dreams quite seriously. The psyche, to engage in active imagination, to value the image, symbolic engagement, to move her intention toward not only understanding the personal in particular, but the mythological, archetypal, and collective unconscious. As we do in our program, this is what we do. Our program blends ancient and indigenous traditions with their models of collective care and community wellness, along with the profound therapeutic approaches from Jungian, post-Jungian pioneers. And this transdisciplinary and integrative focus exemplifies the embodiment of wisdom and care for all sentient beings as we focus on equity and inclusion. Ours is a program that is well positioned philosophically and creatively to imagine ways to address trauma and the technological and socio-political impacts on soul, to listen to symptom as messenger. In the Red Book, Jung reflects on how the spirit of the depths is like watering a dry desert into a garden of feeling. And there's a certain kind of surrender to this, of being witness to the flowering that emerges. So in our program, we nurture this capacity to witness well, listen deeply, even to silence and body, and accompany others through their individuation journey by acknowledging the resonant symbols of various cultures and traditions, honoring spiritual, environmental, sexual, gender, and healing orientations, and temperament preferences, because some of our healing preferences are also temperament preferences. So embracing this notion of therapeutic sensibility, we look for compassion, curiosity, critical thinking, relationality, and ethical character above all else in our candidates. And we long to listen to often unheard voices of those marginalized, violated, and dismissed, including the earth itself, a living and conscious entity that is worthy of our empathy, relationality, and commitment. So what does it mean then to be a psychotherapist, or one who reaches into community in alternative and multicultural and ecotherapeutic healing contexts? So in this way, we ask, how may each of us be in service in the face of, right now, a pandemic and ongoing systemic racism, other kinds of oppression, and the continuously expanding world of cyberspace? Well, denial and projection have never been solutions to a variety of human sufferings. And many of us have experienced the emotional, physical, and spiritual repercussions of living a false life and turning away from compassionate service to self or others. But amplifying the value of service through the therapeutic and healing arts, African shaman Malidoma Somé reminds us that, quote, we carry something transformative inside ourselves, and we are coming here to give it to someone. We are linked through this invisible thread with the ancestors, and they want us to employ them, to give them a job. So our courses in our program, our faculty, as you've seen, we invite this kind of facilitation and awareness through our actions in our practice consult group, small clusters where we support your unique process. It's fluid. There's a verbal texture to our work. And I'm going to go with this quote with philosopher David Abram, who writes, "The mutual inscription of others in my experience, and as I must assume of myself in their experiences, affects the interweaving of our individual phenomenal fields into a single ever-shifting fabric, a single phenomenal world or reality." And in a similar vein, as I'm closing here, Marie-Louise von Franz, speaking of the alchemists, said, "The mystery they were looking for, the mystery of the structure of the universe, was in themselves, in their own bodies, and in that part of the personality which we call the unconscious, but where they saw the source of their own material existence." So I invite you to consider joining us in our own alchemical vessel with this program. It's a unique way to either deepen your already burgeoning or thriving psychotherapy practice, or your alternative healing tradition, whatever you do, this program, you'll know if it's the right one for you, because your dreams will tell you if you listen, really, and your body will tell you. You may even be feeling it right now. I don't know, but you know. So I thank you very much. And now I turn this back to Rica to go into a Q&A, and we're probably going over already. I apologize if I've gone too far over. Thank you.
Thank you all again for joining us today, and I would like to especially thank our speakers, Dr. Rohde-Brown, Dr. Nelson, Dr. Brewster, Dr. Katsky, and Dr. Corbett. And so as just like what Dr. Rohde-Brown said, this is now open to questions, and we would like to encourage everyone to please type their questions in the Q&A box right there at the bottom of your screens. Now, while we're waiting for these questions, with regards to admissions, we'd like to let everyone know that we are still accepting applications for our depth therapy program. And for attending this session, we are actually waiving the $75 application fee. And the link to the free application is right there where you registered on this page. Also, we would like to let everyone know that the start of the classes will not be until September 28th. And so you do have time to get all of your information in. The way admissions works is as soon as you put in your information on our website, you put your name, your email address, and your contact information, our admissions representatives will be contacting you directly and walking you through the process. So we will be holding your hand throughout this, meaning we will let you know what sort of documents you are required to submit, what information that you need to provide us. And then the next step, once you complete all of those will be forwarded to our distinguished faculty here with us to review the file, and they will decide if they will be interviewing you or invite you for the interview, and then we'll walk you through the remainder of the process again through orientation. Okay, so again, we are still accepting applications for this program. So I do have a question here from Zonia. What if I have already paid the application fee? We will be glad to refund that for you, Zonia. So for all of you who have already applied, please let us know. Shoot us an email at admissions@pacifica, and we will gladly refund you the application fee.
I'm curious, does anyone have any questions of us or anything that we spoke about today, or of the structure of the program or anything like that?
Dr. Rohde-Brown, I don't have questions coming in yet, but for the sake of the group, perhaps one of the frequently asked questions that we receive from our students, although you had touched on that a little bit, which is what sort of career trajectories would our students be heading towards upon graduation from this program?
Do you want me to answer that? I'll go ahead and start.
Sure.
Anyone can if they like to. All right, so this is a program that doesn't have a direct career path. That's why if you're already a licensed clinician or on the way to becoming licensed, you've already got kind of a set place in the world. Same thing if you're in any of the healing arts and you're intending to stay in those places and just deepen into your work. So that's where it's the easiest. Okay, if you'd like to move into writing, doing workshops and presentations and that kind of thing, then that's another piece to it. Now, if you don't have any of those kinds of anchors for yourself in the world, like the clinical programs and the counseling program direct you into this world of licensure. Those have easy slots in the world. Okay, you become a clinician, there's an agency, you have private practice, and you can get on insurance panels. We cannot get licensed from this program. So you have to know that you don't have a perfect little slot to fit into. So sometimes our students are called in a different way, and even if they are clinicians, they're wanting to expand out from that and deepen something else that's calling them. But if you don't have that anchor, you don't want to stay in that anchor, then you have to be a little bit creative and entrepreneurial, because you cannot be a psychotherapist from this program ethically if you don't already have the license to do so. You can do other things, but you have to stay out of the realms of what others are licensed to do. So it's a wonderful program. People love it. They're transformed in it. People end up having retreat centers, writing books, consulting, deepening into their psychotherapy practice or their healing arts practice, and learning from the variety of approaches that are offered, even with an emphasis in clinical in some of the classes. Everyone learns from that. So we learn about ourselves a lot from that. But there's no nice little cookie piece, cookie jar piece that you can be put into coming out of this program. That's my answer. Anybody have any other pieces to add to that?
I'll go ahead and add something, Juliet. You've already mentioned the fact that many of the students will transform their dissertation into a book, a published book, or a series of articles or workshops and seminars. So that's something that we keep an eye on. And so we're imagining at the same time that the student is developing their research topic and completing their dissertation, we're looking at where else can this go in the world, and how can that be a source of professional satisfaction and pride, as well as advancement. So that is something that does happen fairly often, and I'm always eager to see that. So, and we encourage it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, me too. And I think that we're in such an interesting time right now, and we're in this kind of more transdisciplinary approach to understanding what we're doing. There's so much need in the communities we live in. There's so much that needs to be addressed, and a lot of suffering. So how can we also conceive of ourselves moving outside of maybe a one-to-one scenario, which is very important also, and know that when we study depth psychology in the way that we're doing, that it's quite a gift to the communities also. And sometimes communities that you wouldn't even think to be going into would be avenues where you could have a niche and a way of working with people through storytelling, through conflict resolution, through multicultural immersion experiences, and bringing the arts into that. And students are coming up with the most creative ideas and applying them, and it's really beautiful to see that, isn't it?
Okay, thank you very much. A question we had here as well was, was pertaining to how we will be delivering our content during our physical campus closures. So now that the campus will be officially closed through December 31st of this year, how does this program plan to deliver asynchronous and synchronous learning?
Okay. Well, we use the Zoom format like we're using now. And we also have something called D2L, and it's kind of a hub where most times when programs become accredited to offer online formats, they have a hub where the syllabus is attached to that hub, and there's an opportunity to have discussions back and forth in between when people are meeting synchronously, interactively through Zoom. So we have kind of both of those, and we actually have a lot of interaction. We offer office time on Zoom, group office time. We do check-ins. We chat with the chair. We have guest speakers. But the format we're using, if that's more of the question, is Zoom. And then this hub where we can turn in papers and have discussion, and images too. It doesn't have to just be the academic place. There can be some playfulness with it as well.
You know, one thing I would add that's, I think, a really important part of our learning process is after the first couple of quarters in the program, everyone in the cohort is grouped into small groups, and those groups meet either in person or via Zoom every 2 weeks. And we call them practice consultation groups, but really they're groups designed to help students get what they want to get from the program. I know that I've spent a lot of time in those groups talking about dissertation development, for example. And students use those groups to share with each other, to brainstorm with each other, to develop supervision skills. But I think the fact that it's a small group really creates this sense of a little core of people that you're special people in the cohort. So that's another way that when we are on campus, we do meet on campus in the groups. But since we haven't been on campus, we've been doing all these meetings on Zoom. But they're wonderful contributions to the overall learning.
Thank you, Dr. Katsky. We do have one question here from Lindsay. Are there financial aid and scholarship opportunities available? If I may answer, yes, we do. If you look at the Pacifica Financial Aid and Scholarship page, we are still, our application for the internal scholarships are still open through September 10th. So if you could get those before September 10th, that'd be great. And you should hear from us around September 15th if you had indeed qualified for the scholarships. However, we also advise that you make an appointment with the financial aid office. They do have 15-minute slots right there on the website, and you can set up an appointment so they can walk you again through the financial aid process. Last but not the least, we do have a comment, not a question, from Zonia. It says, no questions. I'm just so thrilled to be learning with you all. You speak my heart and soul language. My community is having fires right now, so I'm going to support my friends, but thank you so much for all the insight I received today into the climate of the school. And hoping to interview soon. I have so many places to grow and share many blessings. And so for our panelists today, again, there are no further questions, it seems, but I would leave it to the group for your final words and thoughts that you would like to share.
Well, there's something beeping behind me, but I'd just like to say thank you and thank you, Zonia, and good luck and be well. I hope everyone in your community stays safe. And hope all of you stay safe and well in what we're all experiencing right now in the world. But thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you, meeting you, if you are interested in our program. Anybody else?
All right, with that, we will be concluding this webinar then again. We thank you all for joining us here at Pacifica Graduate Institute. This webinar has been recorded, and so we will be sharing this through our Pacifica YouTube page. But again, we are still accepting applications, and we are hoping that you can join us all this fall. All right, thanks again, and we will see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rica, too.
Thank you.